For the first time ever on the African continent, the chief executive officers of foreign mining giants were arrested, all on the same day, at the exact same time. And behind this historic move was one man, Ibrahim Traoré, the bold leader of Burkina Faso. So how did the powerful bosses of the world's biggest mining firms get handcuffed, in a country they once plundered without fear? How did an exploitation system, running for over 50 years, collapse overnight? Subscribe to our channel now for untold stories from the heart of Africa. It all began at 6 o'clock in the morning, on March 15th, in the capital city of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. 7 mining company CEOs, each staying in luxury hotels, were detained simultaneously, as special forces knocked on their doors. Among those arrested were Victor Petro, chief executive officer of Goldmax Corporation, one of the largest gold companies on earth. Also taken were Jean-Claude Dubois, head of Canadian Western Gold Mining, and Michael Thompson, an executive with Australian Pacific Resources. But this wasn't luck. It wasn't spontaneous. Traoré had been planning, quietly, thoroughly, for months. He started by examining the financial records of every mining company operating inside Burkina Faso. Then he brought in a team of international law experts and began building detailed criminal files against them. The picture that emerged was horrifying. Over the span of 50 years, the total value of gold extracted from the country had reached $500 billion, but only $10 billion had ever entered Burkina Faso's treasury. For 6 months, Traoré's team worked in absolute secrecy. They placed informants at nearly every mining site. They used drones to take aerial photos. They analyzed satellite images with precision, and they verified actual production quantities. What they found was terrifying. Companies were reporting just 1/10, yes, only 1/10, of what they truly extracted. Traoré described it like this: "Gold taken from our lands through the hard labor of our people is filling European vaults. While my people are dying from hunger, this system ends today." His warning was direct. Either you return what you stole, or you'll rot in prison for life. The arrests were intense. Victor Petro tried to activate his private security, but Burkina Faso special forces had already taken full control of the hotel. He was arrested in his pajamas and sent straight to a maximum security prison. Western Gold Mining's Dubois was preparing to flee. His private jet was waiting at the airport, but Traoré had already shut the airspace. All borders were sealed. Dubois was intercepted on the way and immediately detained. Michael Thompson, of Australian Pacific Resources, was found inside a hotel meeting room. He was actively trying to transfer company assets out of the country. Right then, his open laptop screen became evidence for the court. Traoré had left nothing to chance. First, he had all mining companies submit their past 10 years of financial documents. Then, experts examined these records for months. The corruption that emerged was mind-boggling. Take Goldmax Corporation, for example. In the year 2019, the company extracted $500 million worth of gold from the Topako gold mine, but paid only $5 million in taxes to Burkina. How? Because 90% of the gold they pulled out was undeclared. They were extracting 10 tons of gold per day, but officially recording just 1 ton. 9 tons vanished into the shadows. Western Gold Mining had its own tactic. The company produced fake invoices. They'd show kilograms of gold, worth $60,000 on the market, as being sold for just $10,000. The rest? It disappeared straight into offshore accounts. But Pacific Resources had an even more bizarre trick. They used miners' salaries as part of their tax evasion scheme. On paper, workers were getting paid 10 times more than they actually received. The company then claimed those inflated wages for tax deductions and pocketed the difference. Traoré wasn't fooled. He reviewed every document, one by one. He filed them, stamped them, saved them, as evidence. But the real bombshell wasn't in the balance sheets. It was in secret deals, made behind closed doors, between mining companies and former government officials. These agreements exposed the deep rot. In 2015, Mark Carbor, the energy minister at the time, accepted $50 million in bribes from Goldmax Corporation. In return, the company's tax rate was dropped from 30% to just 3%. This shady deal alone was costing the country $2 billion every year. Western Gold Mining went further. In 2017, they handed $100 million in bribes to Francois Kabore, the brother of then-President Roch Kabore. And what did they get in return? 3 new gold mining licenses, granted on lands belonging to local villagers. As a result, 50,000 people were forcibly displaced from their homes and farms. Let us pause here. If you lived on that land, what would justice mean to you? Comment Amen if you stand with Traoré. Traoré had seen enough. He gathered all the documents and filed a case at the International Criminal Court. He proved these companies had committed crimes against humanity, forced displacement, child labor, environmental destruction. The court accepted the charges. Then, Traoré made his boldest move. He froze the bank accounts of all mining companies. He seized their local assets and placed every gold reserve under state control. Those reserves, worth $100 billion, now officially belong to the people of Burkina Faso. The world reacted instantly. The arrests exploded across global headlines. Western media called Traoré a dictator. The European Union held an emergency meeting. The United States issued threats. But Traoré stood firm. "We are applying the law," he said. "For 50 years, these companies broke every rule, evaded taxes, exploited our land and our people. Now, finally, justice is being served. Western threats do not scare us." And the people? They stood behind True, united. Hundreds of thousands filled the streets of the capital, Ouagadougou. They held banners high. "Our gold is ours." Villagers living in mining regions were filled with hope. For the very first time, 65-year-old mine worker Amadou Sawado stood before the cameras and spoke through tears. "I have worked in these mines for more than 40 years, he said, his voice cracking. "Europe became rich from the gold we pulled out of the ground, but my own children, they still cannot even attend school. Finally, there is justice for people like us." Meanwhile, the arrested CEOs were enduring harsh conditions inside Burkina Faso's sweltering prisons, a far cry from their former lives of private jets and luxury suites. Victor Petrov, head of Goldmax, started a hunger strike on the very first day. But Trouve was unfazed. "Our mine workers go hungry every single day," he said calmly, yet firmly. "Maybe it's time you learn what that really feels like." Jean-Claude Dubois, the CEO of Western Gold, tried a different route. Through his lawyers, he offered $1 billion in bail. Traoré, however, rejected the offer with a laugh. "What is $1 billion, he said, "compared to the $500 billion you already stole from us? Besides, let's be honest, this so-called money is ours to begin with." Michael Thompson attempted deception. He claimed he was having a heart attack, collapsing in the prison hallway. But doctors sent personally by Traoré found no trace of any cardiac condition. The fake illness? It backfired. It became evidence of obstruction used against Thompson in court. Others arrested included Robert Mackenzie from Continental Gold, James Harrison from African Minerals, Peter Williams from Global Mining Co-op, and David Anderson from Summit Resources. Each one's story was worse than the last. Mackenzie was charged with forcibly displacing entire villages. Harrison stood accused of employing children as young as 10 years old in hazardous work. Williams faced charges of environmental destruction on a massive scale. And Anderson? He was linked to providing material support to armed militant groups. Then came the trials. The world watched, as the eyes of justice turned toward Burkina Faso. Traoré had established a special court for these unprecedented cases. Its composition drew immediate international attention. 3 African judges, 2 from Asia, and 2 from Latin America. The message was clear. No Western influence, no bias, only justice. At the very first hearing, the lead prosecutor stood before the courtroom and read the charges out loud, one by one. Separate legal files had been prepared for each defendant. Goldmax Corporation's Victor Petro faced 234 separate charges: tax evasion, bribery, environmental destruction, forced displacement of civilians, and more. Western Gold Mining's Jean-Claude Dubois faced 189 charges, the most horrifying of all, the use of child labor. It was proven beyond any doubt that children as young as 12 were working underground in the company's mines. 16 hours a day, no sunlight, no air. And most of them never survived past the age of 15 due to fatal lung diseases. The most serious charge against Pacific Resources' Michael Thompson was even more chilling. Executive Thompson was polluting water sources with cyanide. The cyanide used by the company had poisoned 3 rivers. Cancer cases had increased tenfold in 17 villages. More than 2,000 people had lost their lives. The testimonies of victims, heard in court, under oath, broke hearts. They weren't just numbers. They were sons and daughters, mothers and fathers. Stories that had been buried were now being spoken aloud. Musa Orahugo, who began working in the mine when he was only 8 years old, and now, at 23, was battling chronic lung disease, spoke while holding back tears. "They stole my childhood," he said, his voice shaking. "They stole my health. They took everything. My life, my strength, my future." Then came the voice of 70-year-old Mariam Cow. Her village had been forcibly evacuated. She stood with a scarf over her head, hands trembling. "Our ancestors' graves were on those lands," she said softly. "Our family home was there. They didn't just remove us, they destroyed every single thing, for gold." "And what did we receive?" She paused. $100. Her voice cracked. 100. When the gold from our land is worth billions of dollars. Traoré remained calm but visibly resolute throughout the trial. He came to the courthouse every single day. He didn't sit in a hidden office. He stood with his people. He listened to every word. He looked the accused in the eyes. Speaking to journalists one morning outside the courtroom, he said, "This is not just Burkina Faso's case. This is all of Africa's case. If we can succeed, if we stay strong, then other countries will be encouraged." And he was right. Traoré's defiant stance created a ripple, a domino effect across the continent. In Mali, Imi Goa launched formal investigations into foreign mining giants. In Guinea, Madi Doya began similar steps. In Niger, Abdul Rahman Chiani cancelled multiple mining agreements. One after another, the old contracts were falling. Western mining corporations began to panic. Shares plunged. Goldmax Corporation lost over 70% of its market value. Western gold mining teetered on the edge of collapse. Pacific Resources was forced to shut down all its operations across Africa. Panic spread to European capitals. Crisis meetings were held in closed rooms. And then came the threats. French President Macron publicly warned Rouet, "You will pay the price for what you have done. You cannot touch our investors." But Traoré's response was direct, unapologetic. "Say colonizers," he said, "not investors. We welcome real investors, but we do not want thieves disguised in suits." US President Biden followed with more threats. He promised sanctions. He said Washington would cut financial aid to Burkina Faso. Traoré laughed. His reply was firm and cutting. "Which aid?" he said. "The $100 million you give per year? We will earn $10 billion every year just from our own gold mines. Keep your aid. Give it to your puppet states." Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, new evidence continued to surface. Emails recovered from company computers revealed the true faces of the executives. At Goldmax Corporation, executives had called the people of Burkina Faso stupid natives in private messages. "We make them do anything we want with a few million in bribes," one message said. "They dance for dollars." Western gold mining's internal communications were worse. Executives had referred to child workers as cheap labor, and then came this chilling sentence. "Instead of giving $100 to one adult worker, we give $10 each to 10 children. And they never make a sound," wrote CEO Dubois. At Pacific Resources, internal memos outlined step-by-step plans to dump cyanide waste directly into rivers. "No one will notice," the report stated. "Besides, these people don't live long anyway. Even if they die from cancer, they won't know who to blame," read one particularly chilling document. At Continental Gold, Robert Mackenzie described the brutal displacement of villagers as a necessary sacrifice for progress. At African Minerals, James Harrison rationalized the deaths of workers inside the mines by calling it an acceptable loss. And at Global Mining Co-op, Peter Williams dismissed an entire environmental collapse with the words, "Nature will renew itself, eventually." Traoré trembled as he read those files, his hands shaking, but he did not explode. He closed the folder, looked forward, and spoke calmly. "You see what they really think of us. To them, we are disposable. But the game is over now. Justice will be served." In the 6th month of the trial, The verdict was finally announced. The courtroom was silent. But the air, it crackled with something greater than tension. All CEOs were found guilty. Victor Petrov of Goldmax was sentenced to 50 years in prison, along with a $10 billion fine. Jean-Claude Dubois from Western Gold received 45 years in prison and an $8 billion fine. Michael Thompson of Pacific Resources was sentenced to life imprisonment for environmental destruction that led to mass poisoning and death. Robert Mackenzie of Continental Gold was given 40 years for forced displacement of civilians. James Harrison, for employing children in deadly labor conditions, was sentenced to 55 years behind bars. Peter Williams received 60 years for large-scale environmental destruction and causing mass casualties. David Anderson, for financing armed groups, was sentenced to life without parole. There was one more striking detail in the court's decision. All personal assets of the CEOs were confiscated. Luxury yachts, seaside villas, private jets, rare art collections. Everything was seized by the state. And then, something no one expected. The court ruled that proceeds from the sale of these assets would be distributed directly to the families of victims. Following the ruling, Traoré made a historic speech from the courthouse steps. "Today," he said, voice steady, "we did not just try 7 men. We put a 500-year colonial system on trial. And today, we won."